All right, can you hear me? Neither of us know how to hold these things, so if you can't hear us, let us know. But again, my name's Carissa. I work a lot, I'm mainly on the Instagram space. I work a lot with, mystery, thriller, horror books, mainly in that niche, but within that, crime fiction, which is how I found Hannah. So yeah, that's pretty much about me. I don't know if you want to say a quick hello. Most people probably know you, but just in case.
Well, I'm Hannah. Yeah, actually I knew Carissa online, but I met her here this summer. We were here for Blake Crouch together. Like we were just in the audience, and then she recognized me and I recognized her, and like here we are however many months later. So that's cool.
Yeah.
But I'm Hannah Morrissey. I'm the author of Hello Transcriber, which came out last year. Crime fiction, thriller, police procedural, and I'm back with a follow-up, but we'll get into that. But yeah, a follow-up, The Widowmaker, also crime fiction, police procedural, thriller, takes place in Wisconsin, our lovely snowy state.
So kind of going from there. So I initially read The Widowmaker when the ARCs were first released, which is an advanced early copy. And then I listened to it again, and it's a very, very good book. I don't know how many of you got a chance to read it yet. But something that's interesting too, when I was kind of midway through it, I realized that I hadn't read her first book, and I kind of panicked and thought, well, I didn't read them in order. I'm not going to know what's going on, but they're totally books that can be read out of order, whether you read the Widowmaker. We'll get into that soon.
Yeah.
The addition of the
Yeah.
the Widowmaker first, and then Hello Transcriber second, or the other way around, which is what I kind of loved. So kind of going off of that and the setting of Black Harbor and kind of the world of Black Harbor, can you kind of speak a little bit on how you kind of created that and any inspiration you drew from Wisconsin?
Yeah, so I'll start off. A lot of times I'll do a conversation and I forget to give a synopsis of the book. So I don't want to do that. So we will talk a little bit about what The Widowmaker is about. So when I talk about what The Widowmaker, I usually like to start with just a little recap of Hello Transcriber. Hello Transcriber takes place in this, fictional Wisconsin city of Black Harbor, and we return to Black Harbor, as Carissa was saying, in The Widowmaker. And Black Harbor, especially for the purposes of, The Widowmaker, Black Harbor is where broken souls and bad people make themselves at home. And the broken souls in The Widowmaker are Morgan Morey, a down on her luck photographer, and investigator Ryan Hudson, a detective for the Black Harbor Police Department. And Morgan actually returns home to Black Harbor, a place that she never thought she would go back to. When she's, given this, her life goes up in ash and flame, and she's left with a cryptic key and a note that says all roads lead back to home. So she's back home in Black Harbor. She gets a gig shooting a Christmas party for the wealthiest family in town, the Reynolds family, who have for 20 years been shrouded in mystery since their patriarch, Clive, disappeared. And that night, she also witnesses the murder of a cop, which puts her on the radar of investigator Ryan Hudson, who not only is he trying to, find out who murdered his best friend, but incidentally, the murder of his best friend has triggered the resurfacing of a long buried clue that leads to this cold case. And he's about to find out how Morgan connects to maybe everything. So that's The Widowmaker, and we're back in Black Harbor. It is, the most crime-ridden, gritty city. It's snowy. I've been asked if I'm going to write a summer book in Black Harbor. Probably no. Why? It's summer for a minute, so why would we, even delve into that? But I love Black Harbor as a setting because it's very much become a recurring character of the series. So, as Chris was saying, you do not need to read the books in order. There are some recurring characters who come from Hello Transcriber into The Widowmaker, and you'll see them again, maybe in another book. But one of the recurring characters is Black Harbor itself. And I really like experimenting with that idea of how all of the characters are products of that environment, as well as, how an environment that's that crime ridden and that gritty and has those harsh elements, like how does it force people to interact with it, and how are those people forced to interact with each other? So in Hello Transcriber, we're very much in the center of the city with the police department and the bridge, and The Widowmaker, we are much more on the outskirts. We're on the edge, the shore, the crumbling shoreline with the mansions that are sliding into the lake. So it's really fun to like play with what kind of people live over there.
So going off the characters of Morgan and Hudson, where did you draw any like inspiration from real life for their characters? What was kind of your main goals for their characters as a whole when you started off? And we'll kind of get into your writing process a little bit too. And then kind of along the way, was there anything kind of about their characters that you wrote in that didn't plan to, or kind of surprised you in that way throughout?
I think there's always something surprising. I think you're writing a really flat character if they don't surprise you in some way. Sometimes good surprises, sometimes bad. But yeah, the book is told between alternating perspectives of Morgan and Hudson. So every chapter goes Morgan, Hudson, Morgan, Hudson. And I found that it works really well for pacing, especially if I'm like, well, I wrote Morgan into a corner. Let's see what Hudson's up to. So it keeps the story moving, but I really enjoyed writing those dual perspectives because I think you learn the most about characters when the characters see each other. So when Morgan is suddenly in Hudson's chapters or he's in her chapters, like you see how she sees him versus how he sees himself, or you see secondary characters like through Morgan's eyes versus Hudson's eyes. And Morgan is very anti-authority. She's a rebel and, you know, doesn't always have her morals straight, but I don't think any of the characters in Black Carpet do. And then, you know, you have Hudson, who's very straight-laced, very sensitive. So just that really stark contrast between those two characters was interesting to play with. But for Morgan being a photographer, I say I used to be a photographer, I still am, I guess, but I used to be a photographer. And I think it's something like we don't see a character who's a photographer a lot. I haven't seen that character pop up in a lot of fiction, especially crime fiction. And I really like this, you know, this dichotomy of having like building this police procedural with a character who's maybe not necessarily a detective all the time. Because I think they're a little bit more relatable for a lot of readers. I mean, we're not all detectives. So I think it's easier to make it for like layman's terms. People can understand it a little better, go along for the ride. But with Morgan being a photographer, you have this interesting thing to play with where suddenly everything she's seeing is through a unique lens. And for her and her past, she very much uses the camera as sort of protection or a defense mechanism. It's always like a separation between her and reality. And, you know, as a photographer, like I realized too, how interesting and a little bit scary it is that people will give you a backstage pass into their life just because you're holding a camera. So
Especially the Reynolds house.
yes, especially the Reynolds house. So I thought, wouldn't that be fun to create kind of, you know, if she's got this camera that's, you know, going to pretty much let her in anywhere, like what kind of family would everybody, you know, kind of kill to have access to? So that sort of creates the Reynolds family and like what they've got going on. And then Hudson, I'm always sort of fighting against the trope of the hard-boiled, hard-drinking detective character. I like reading those sometimes, but I don't think they're definitely not all like that. And I really like exploring the more human aspect of police, especially, and just taking a character who you totally don't expect. Like he's in sensitive crimes, and sensitive crimes is a not very desirable job for a lot of people because it deals with mostly like child victims and stuff. So, but as a new detective, that's where he's going to end up, and he doesn't want to be there. So, you know, suddenly the prospect of solving this cold case is like sort of, you know, the carrot that's being dangled over him. If you solve this cold case, you'll never have to work sensitive crimes again. So I think giving each character their own motives and like how they're going to get there.
Yeah, for sure. And I really liked, kind of like what you mentioned before about Hudson's character, not just being like the same old detective that you always see, which was really refreshing for me as someone who spent like probably 10 plus years reading only crime fiction and only, you know, that exact same detective over and over, kind of regardless, just in different kind of story plots. So it was very refreshing that way. And I didn't know if you kind of drew, I think, inspiration for your characters in general, but especially like kind of showing us deeper pieces into these characters, like Hudson specifically, kind of the more, without spoiling anything, but the more like softer parts of him that we don't see and Morgan didn't see right away, and then kind of like not really evolved, but was kind of revealed a little bit to us. And I found some of that with Morgan too, kind of throughout too. So I didn't know if kind of your character arcs for them along the way, if you kind of plan that ahead of time, or as you go through, you kind of decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's planned ahead of time as much as you can, but I think with Hudson too, it's like, well, when I start building a character, I always ask them like a couple of questions. You know, number one, what do you want the most? Second, what's stopping you from getting it? Third, what's your quirk? And because that makes them memorable. And fourth, what are you afraid of? And because you know that whatever they're afraid of, they're going to have to face that fear at some point. And for Hudson, he has a fear of drowning. And I mean, as do I. So it was sometimes hard to look at like reference photos of, you know, this, you know, there's a Porsche that's found drowned at the bottom of Lake Michigan. And I'm like, oh my God, with a body inside, I'm like, that is my worst fear. So I'm going like, that's his worst fear. So he's afraid of water and drowning, and he has his reasons for it. And, you know, how is he going to have to face that fear later? And same, you know, with Morgan, like Morgan's very much afraid of people, and she's afraid of reality and like getting close to people. So I think, you know, putting your characters in uncomfortable situations, like that's going to make them grow more than anything.
Yeah, and I think it really helps, like as readers as well, kind of form that connection with those characters where sometimes people don't see themselves as closely aligned with characters versus others, whereas pieces like that really help too. So kind of going into the setting of Black Harbor as a whole, I think the term has been coined for your books, Midwestern noir, which I'm obsessed with, and I think is very descriptive of your books and the setting especially. So kind of, where did you draw inspiration for Black Harbor? Where were you kind of, obviously Wisconsin? Yeah, because some of it I'm like, yep, for sure. But I didn't know if there was any specific pieces you drew and kind of what's next for Black Harbor going forward too.
Yeah, I think even just like touching on Midwestern noir first, because sometimes people ask me like, are you always going to write about Wisconsin? And I think yes, because why not? And I do think that the Midwest is very, it's underrepresented in fiction, and it's also very underrated, because when you think about noir, like Scandinavian noir is, it's defined by harsh elements and cold and snow and remote locations. And that sounds a lot like Wisconsin to me. So I'm like, we don't have to read Scandinavian noir, like as much as I love it, but we can bring that here. We have that here. And I think it's, as much as people read to escape, like we also read to relate too. So it's fun when you can kind of like identify your city, or like where you, a place that feels like your city. So I wanted Black Harbor, like, although it very much is inspired by like southeastern Wisconsin, with, you know, being on the edge of Lake Michigan, because if you want harsh elements, just go to the lake and everything is 10 times colder. Like when I moved down here, I learned a new term, lake effect. I did not, like, you feel the lake effect. Like that's not something that can really be defined. Like you just feel it, and it does permeate through walls, and it does punch through windows. So like with my books, like I want people to feel cold. And I think in the Midwest, like we're some of like the only people in the United States who know the meaning and the feeling of the word bone chilling. Like people use that word and they throw it around a lot, but not everybody really knows what it feels like. Or you don't know what it feels like when your nose hairs are stuck together, or like what, you know, that there's no difference between -35 and 0. Or, you know, they don't call school off until it's -32 degrees or whatever the cutoff is.
Plus the wind chill.
Yeah, plus the wind chill, yeah. So I love like the noirness of the Midwest. I think we have a lot to offer here. And I like throwing my characters in those like cold, remote, you know, sometimes hopeless situations. But yeah.
Do you have plans for another book set in Black Harbor?
I do.
And it's not a summer book.
It is not a summer book. I am working on a book that takes
Mhm.
place in the summer, not Black Harbor though. But yeah, there is a third Black Harbor book. It's written. I have to do copy edits on it yet. I'm not looking forward to that. But yeah, it's slated to come out in fall of 2023, and I really do hope that it comes out before Halloween because it does take place over Halloween. Which yeah, I must have been like in the holiday mindset because I'm like Widowmaker Christmas. Okay, the next one, Halloween. So the next one is called When I'm Dead, and it's about a character that's a medical examiner. So I think what's fun about this series and like what Carissa touched on is that, you know, for example, the medical examiner, Emmy Winthorpe, she's mentioned in a report in Hello Transcriber. In the Widowmaker, she shows up as for a cameo for, you know, a page. And now in When I'm Dead, she's the main character. So she's married to a homicide detective named Axel, and they have a 15-year-old daughter named Chloe, and they go to watch Chloe's musical at the high school, and they get called out to investigate a homicide in their neighborhood, and they discover, you know, it's Chloe's best friend who's been murdered. And when they return home after the investigation, Chloe's gone. And then it becomes a race of like, we need to find our daughter, but is she a victim or is she guilty maybe? So that's When I'm Dead.
That's exciting. So not to like just really go at this thing, but so the Black Harbor kind of now that's turning into a series. When you wrote the first one, did you initially plan to write more than one? So like when you kind of had those kind of people that peeped through, like from the Widowmaker that are in Hello Transcriber and so forth in the next one too, did you plan that or was it kind of like, oh, now I can go from there and use that? Or both?
No, like Hello Transcriber was meant to be just one novel. But you know, working through it, it's like once you know, you sell the book to the publisher, you're still working on it with them from there. And, you know, I think like through that process, like learning how much interest, I guess, there was for Black Harbor itself. I just thought I've explored like such a small part of this town, and I would like to explore some more of it. So, you know, I was like, I know this city, but I want to keep discovering more things about it. So, and there's so many people left here that I haven't touched on yet. So yeah, I was like, well, I think I want to continue to set it in Black Harbor, and we're going to deal with these people instead. And we're going to go to the shoreline and see what's going on there. You know, things that were mentioned in Hello Transcriber, but you didn't actually go over there. And, so yeah, I just built it in the same universe. We're still with the Black Harbor Police Department, and characters kind of like intermingle. They go between books, which I think is fun. So yeah, you definitely don't have to read them in order. I think it's more fun if you do, because then you can kind of keep up with like certain supplementary character storylines and stuff. But yeah, there's a couple characters. Besides Black Harbor, there's one character who I want to be in all of them. And, you know, maybe they'll get a feature book at the very end, but, yeah, ideally I would love to have 5 in the series. So, yeah.
How about 10? How's that?
I don't know.
No.
I mean, if they're going to pay me to write 10, I suppose.
There we
I
go.
could.
I think there would definitely be readers for them for
Yeah.
sure. So kind of going off into more like your writing process. So as a reader, I'm always really curious, like just as writing process in general, but I think people who, you know, write or are getting into writing too are always intrigued and wanting to know more from people who do it and do it well as well. So what is kind of a peek into your writing process, your writing space, your environment when you do it? You know, how do you like to lay that out?
I think something that like I fought against a lot before I became like a serious writer, was, you know, it's like you can think you're a serious writer because you write in your spare time and you know, write when you get home from work, but like you're not a serious writer until you have a regiment and a word count goal. So I fought against that for years. I got nowhere. So, I do set like a word count goal for myself if I'm working, depending on what stage of a manuscript I'm in. But when I'm drafting, I usually do shoot for 1,000 words a day, Monday through Friday. and then I take Saturdays off and 2,000 words on Sundays. But Saturdays I read, so I like catch up on my reading on Saturdays.
Gotta have some balance. for
Yeah.
sure.
But yeah, I write from 5 a.m. to usually like 9 or 10 every day. And I mean, sometimes, people forget that like research is writing too. So sometimes you're gonna spend hours researching, but like for me, like I still have to hit that word count goal. I don't care if I spent 3 hours researching freaking Porsches because I don't know anything about them. Like you still have to hit your word count goal. Yeah, in my writing space, I think it's a computer and a desk and a bunch of dinosaurs. But then I have my murder board, which is a really good, like people are very interested in that on Zoom calls. What's that? Like, don't worry, you're not on it yet. But yeah, my murder board was like a game changer. And I know that like with the Widowmaker, even like when I get to book 50, like the Widowmaker will be special because it's the book that perpetuated or necessitated the murder board. Because you'll see like as you read it, there's quite a few characters like that kind of come at you in the beginning, like at that Christmas party. And I'm like, they all connect, and some of them connect in multiple ways. But like, I need to keep this straight. I'm like, I need one of those boards, like they have at a detective bureau with the string connecting people. So what started as like kind of a wallpaper with dry erase board and my pictures on it is now like a 7-foot by 4-foot drywall paint. And I just go on Google and I'll find character references. Sometimes it's actors, sometimes they're just aesthetics that I'm looking for. And I feel really creepy when I'm like Googling 13-year-old blonde girl or whatever. I'm like, oh my God. And then, I put my characters that if their pictures in black and white, it means they're dead or I'm planning to kill them at some point. And then they all get like a bio and they get the lines with how they connect to each other. But even just more, I think, more beneficial than that, just like seeing how your characters connect with the murder board is that you can't go into that room and ignore them. Like they're always staring at you. So I even did that with my third book. I thought I was like, done. I did it. And then my editor's like, no, rewrite it. But I had already made a new murder board with different people on it. I'm like, stop doing this. Like you keep, I love to prematurely take the murder board down. And fill it full of new characters in a different book. And I left, for my new book that I'm working on, I left my one character sitting in a bar for a month. And I'm like, I promise I'm coming back.
Hang out for a while.
Yeah, I'm like, I will be back.
So then kind of going into your books as a whole, but especially, the Black Harbor ones and with the Widowmaker too. So going into it, I know that's kind of what caused you to make your murder board. No, I can't talk. And kind of go from there. So did you go in knowing these are the people that are for sure going to live, these are the people that are for sure going to die, or do you kind of figure that out along the way with the help of the board too?
You think you have it figured out, but then you change your mind. So I always end up changing the beginning and the ends of my book multiple times.
Yeah.
But even with the Widowmaker, I switched up who the bad person is a couple times. And I always end up going back to who I initially thought it was. But I'm like, I'm not mad that I explored those other people because then it gives me like, I really believed it. So I can make it believable for the reader that like, maybe it is this person or maybe it is that person because I really thought it was that person. So I'm like, it kind of happens by like happy accident, but yeah, it's really just because, I don't know, I guess I like, I fooled myself with it a couple of times, but yeah, I think sometimes I'll go into a book not knowing if a character is gonna like live or die at the end. Like, I don't know, I'll see how I feel, like, or see like what
a bad day.
Yeah, or see like what my editor is. Sometimes I'll like kill somebody, and she's like, "Did you have to?" Like, they could live. I'm like, well, I guess.
Too bad.
But they're in black and white. Like, no,
Right.
it can't.
It used to happen. Very cool. So then being a reader yourself as well, when you started your writing process and then now kind of further into it too, do you draw or did you draw getting into it inspiration from any specific authors, specific genres? I know crime fiction obviously is a big influence in your work because it's what you wrote about, but
True.
I didn't know if, kind of going into it in the way, like if there's any other genres or authors that you kind of pull pieces from in your process.
Not too much. I feel like I have my my own process. I think if somebody were to look at my Google Docs, I like to write in Google Docs, and I think if somebody were to open up my file, aside from the subject matter that I'm writing about, they would think I was nuts because it's tons of comments of like me talking to myself, of being like, I even scared myself a couple weeks ago because I was starting a new manuscript. And I didn't even go in the comments. I was just like going off of like my synopsis. And then all of a sudden, like in all caps, I was like, Hannah, you are not thinking big enough. I'm like, oh my God, who? And I must have wrote that like 2 weeks ago. But yeah, it's I like to, highlight things, put notes in the comments because I don't really like to disrupt my momentum. Like if I have good momentum, I'll kind of like highlight it, make a comment, come back to it later. Or sometimes you just need to like have a good think about it.
Yeah.
But then as far as like writing process inspiration, I don't really draw from a lot of people. However, I think Stephen King's memoir is so good on writing. And because that book is like split into 3 parts, and one of the middle part is like his writing process. And he always says like write with the door closed, which it's just kind of like write with the door closed. Don't worry about, who's going to read it. Like this is just for you to sort of lay the groundwork and like, don't worry about having first readers and stuff. So he also says like put your phone in a drawer. Like I don't do that. I should.
Might be helpful.
Yeah, it probably would be better.
So I think we're running out of time for our chat, and we'll turn it over to more of a Q&A here soon. But I didn't know if you had to choose a present that Morgan and Hudson would each want for Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
What would you choose? It can't be a camera.
Or
I don't know what Hudson would want. New boots or something.
See, I have to like go and reread this.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Because you just read it
Trying to be
twice.
festive.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Morgan would definitely want like a whole big thing of candy because she loves candy and sweet things, which I thought that was like kind of fun to play around with her character, where she is sort of she's like this very sort of spooky and hardened person. And yet, one time when I was, one of the characters was making her a latte, and I was like, well, of course she would just want her coffee black. And I was like, no, that's stupid. Like that's been done and done and done. I'm like, that's so expected. So I think she wants like the whipped cream and all the marshmallows and like all the fixings. And so I think Morgan would definitely want like a big bucket of candy. Hudson's boring. He even gives practical gifts for Christmas.
Yeah.
So I feel like he should get a practical gift back because that's shady.
That's fair.
Give him like a gas card.
Right. We'll use it eventually.
Yeah, like $20, we can get like a quarter tank.
Yeah. Especially in Black Harbor's economy.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. I don't know if you have any other small things you wanted to kind of touch on, Hannah, for the Widowmaker as a whole, or Hello Transcriber of Black Harbor.
I don't think so, except for Carissa just told me yesterday that her maiden name is Reynolds. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, because I did promise my editor, I was like, I'll have this like stitched on a pillow for you of I will never again write a character whose surname ends in S, because forever we were like, is it Reynolds? Is it Reynolds apostrophe S? Is it S apostrophe? Are they the Reynolds? And I was like, here I had a Reynolds. I could have just asked.
I wouldn't know. I'm not a Reynolds anymore, but it's a very funny coincidence.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So very cool. Any other questions or anything at all? Any comments? Yeah.
Are there any specific places in Wisconsin that inform certain aspects of Black Harbor for you?
Yeah, Racine. Yeah, no, I'll be honest. Like a lot of it, it's very much inspired by Racine. But also like because that's what I new at the time, and that's very much what I know, but I really love getting details from places that I can walk around in and explore myself. And, I think it's just as much of, Black Harbor, like using setting as a character, it's a character study when you can walk around and you can see the salt on the sidewalk and you can hear that salt crunching beneath your feet and you can walk past a building and see the windows broken out of and you can see it's patched with the garbage bag, or you can see like, that bridge that's stretching like a skeleton across the river. Like those are the things I think that bring a place to life. So I would probably draw inspiration from anywhere that I was like around, like living near at the time, because it's so accessible and you can absorb yourself in it. But I'm also very much drawn to those cities that are kind of like the ghosts of industry are left, where, it's like maybe there were these big industrial titans and they're not there anymore. And like, what has that done to the economy and what has that done to the people? And a lot of times when industry moves out, crime moves in. And those places are super interesting to me. And I think there's a lot of them around. So it's Black Harbor, while inspired by Racine very much, and southeastern Wisconsin is also like kind of in every town that I like it. I like for people to think like, oh, I know that place, or I've driven through there.
I think too, I was just going off that really quick before we get into the next part too. So you mentioned that in each Black Harbor book, they kind of explore a different area of Black Harbor. So how does that look in the third book, whether if you want to actually say we're in Black Harbor or just kind of like atmospherically, it's going to be similar, but what area of Black Harbor are we getting into in the next one?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I did kind of hang out by the lake a little bit still. But there's like it's a very visible divide. Like on one side of the fence, there's this place called, Rainbow Row, and that's, it was built for the workers of the old tannery, and the tannery is now defunct, and, it's been split up into different housing, and people are sort of looked down upon who live over there now. And, my characters live on the other side. So they're a little bit more well-to-do, but there's also strain on that they have to, not only do they have very demanding jobs as like a medical examiner and a homicide detective, but it's a lot of stress to like keep up that kind of place, and not have to go to the other side. But also very much, there's like a walking trail that goes to the school, because one of the POV characters is like a 16-year-old girl. So she was like my lens into the school as well as into the neighborhood where my characters are. So, and I think just the different time of year creates such a different atmosphere. I mean, it's still cold. We don't get that like, the bone chilling cold, but it was fun to like play with some color once in a while. Like we have like the colorful leaves and the jack-o'-lanterns and stuff. So I thought that created like a nice different atmosphere.
Yeah, for sure. All kind of still in the same universe as well, for sure.
So some of the things I loved about this book was the surprise connections. And I won't say it because the people haven't read it, but a couple of times when it's jaw dropped, like, wait a second. Did you know that ahead of time, or did they end up on your murder board getting connected later in the process? I couldn't say who they are, but some of the ones that shocked me, I was
I mean, I'm glad that happened. Some of them, I would say I probably am good for like planning half of them, but most of the time I'm surprised too. And then I think about it, I'm like, oh, that was good. Okay, good. Oh, Rebecca.
So, you mentioned that you're gonna write a book about meeting up, which I'm from the scene and he's to the gritty and but I also used to live in Oklahoma, and I'm saying around the lake, if you will. I don't know what Minnesota has that mean, but
No, we have more.
you yourself writing a book in the deep woods in the lake.
Yeah, no, that would be that would be fascinating. And I'm kind of like working through that like concepting. I'm drafting another book and sort of conceptualizing another one, like trying to get my synopsis down and everything. And I don't know, initially I was wanting to go out that way. But that was my question of like, you're not thinking big enough. So I was like, I would love to revisit that. And also I'm like, I have a thing for like putting people in lakes and body of water. I'm like, you gotta stop doing that. Like think outside of the lake, Hannah. Like there are other scary things.
It's a super big lake though.
But no, I love like the deep woods, the remotes, nobody here can hear you scream. Like it calls to me. I like that. Yeah. Well, in Widowmaker, they head up.
I'm
Apparently.
not joking. Like, when we went the first time, I think she's talking about where I grew up, and then the next time you went, I'm like.
Yeah, like Nakabee. Yeah, I'm like, I think I was there once when I was like 11. Oh yeah.
Like Midwest or style that you like to write in, is that what you like to read too, or do you kind of go outside the genre?
That's a good question. Yes, I do like to read a lot of like noir, gritty. I do like violent stuff. I don't know. Like I think I am
I
like,
can admit it. It's okay.
yeah, I think we're in good company. But yeah, no, I do like to read that sort of noir genre because everything is so stark. Everything is so definite. Like it's like there's definite, but then you have these morally gray characters that live in there, which I love. But I also do like to read literary fiction. And I think it's good to kind of like cleanse your palate a little bit so you're not getting completely saturated with too much of one genre all the time. And I actually know like a lot of writers who will not read in their genre because they're so terrified of stealing something, which I don't have that fear because I'm like, nothing's an original thought. Like, whatever.
I felt like I needed therapy after reading this one.
Oh, good.
That's how you know it's good.
Yeah. No.
Young and reading this was difficult in part, but because, to your point, I have never read anything like it. It was fascinating.
Oh,
But
thank you.
I just felt so dark.
Yeah.
afterwards. And so do you ever get into that spot at home? Like after writing a scene?
No.
No?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
He was just waiting to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if my barometer is like busted or something because I was even laughing with my grandma this week we were at an event and she came and I was like, people are saying the Widowmaker is so dark and she's like, what? Ha. Like, people laugh. I'm like, I know. But no, I think because for me in my mind, like I just compartmentalize. I'm like, it's fiction. Like it's because my sister tells me the same thing. She's like, well, you don't have kids. And I was like, then don't read my third book. But like for her, you guys should definitely all read it. But like, she's like, it'd be different if you had kids. And like some of this stuff is so dark, like even, different TV shows that we like to watch. She's like, I can't watch that stuff. I'm like, I understand that. And I can totally, empathize, I think with people on that. But also like for me, I think because it's like what I do every day, I'm like, this is fiction. And I literally created this character to do this to them.
I did review and say that you handled it with grace.
Oh, thank you.
I thought.
Oh, thank you.
So how do you research this procedure? Do you have things to do with textbooks or is it all just online?
Oh, I married one. So yes, I mean, he probably doesn't love it that we have impromptu interviews all the time. But yeah, there's nothing I love more than a long car ride because I'm like, okay, so I was thinking this. But yeah, I mean, I have endless resources and I feel like because of that, like it would almost be a crime if I didn't write crime fiction. Because there's a lot of thriller writers who would like kill to be in my spot. But I very much like my husband Hans is excellent. an excellent resource for all kinds of things where if I have a question, like he can get me an answer, even if he doesn't know it, he knows somebody who does know it. And just for the Widowmaker, I actually interviewed our friend Sarah, who used to be a sensitive crimes detective. So I wanted to know, like, what is that like? And, because it's not a desirable job, and sort of how do you handle that, and how do you, sort of like not take it home with you, or like not let it weigh you down a little bit, like what Rebecca was saying. And it's like, she was the one who told me, like, you feel like you're drowning because there's all these cases that stack up, and how do you prioritize one person's tragedy over another? And, so I was like, that actually led to Hudson's fear of drowning. So you can see, like, just any insight you get from people can really shape your characters.
So for your next book, did you have help from an ME as well to create
I-
that character?
I did. Yes. So actually my friend was just like, you should write a book about a medical examiner. I was like, okay. And I'm like, I do not know anything about that. So I had to make friends with a medical examiner. So I did. And Hans like called up her boss, asked if it would be okay if I interviewed her. And I did. And we sat and we ate noodles, and she showed me pictures on her phone, and we talked about all kinds of gross things. And yeah, we've been friends ever since. And she'll like she'll like read my stuff, and because I'm like, I don't know all of that stuff. So like if there's something that my character should be saying or shouldn't be saying, and she was like writing out diagrams on a takeout box once. I'm like, just read my stuff. I'm not gonna remember that. But no, and then my friend Dave back there, he does like process serving. So he helped me with my book that I'm drafting right now. And just sometimes like things like that, conversations or things that people say, it's like they make their way into the book, and it's so fun to see. Like sometimes interviewing somebody, it changes the whole book, or it creates a whole different character, which is fun. So there's always a ton of research built into my books. Like I couldn't write a book without doing research, but I think like it's so fun to me. I don't even think of it like that. I just like talking to experts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you just tell the story about your covers and how much they have in it? Your cover of Hello Transcriber, you asked the one thing not to be on it.
Oh yeah. Hans loves this story.
I like it now too, after last week.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of times like people will be like, oh my gosh, I love the cover, or like, I love the cover of Hello Transcriber. I love the cover of the Widowmaker. I'm like, thanks. I had like nothing to do with it really. But I think sometimes people think that like authors have more input than they do. Which I think maybe if you pushed, like you maybe could. I mean, John Grisham probably gets a say in his covers. But with Hello Transcriber, my editor is like super cool. And she was like, ultimately it's the art department's decision, but is there anything that you hate that you absolutely don't want on the cover? And I was like, I hate the color pink, purple, and I don't want people on it. And I mean, there was no pink and there was no purple, but there is a people. So I was like, we got 2 out of the 3. And I mean, the bridge was wrong. So I was like, okay, fight your battles, pick your battles. I'm like, that bridge has got to change. And it was like a friendly little walking bridge, which I'm like, this doesn't look like something that people jump off of. So I was like, can you please? And then you go in your head and I'm like, did I not say like 50 times throughout this book that it's a black bridge, like, a railroad bridge? And then, so I asked them to fix the bridge. They did. So I'm like, fine, you can leave the people on it. And then even with, the Widowmaker, which I love the cover right off the bat. I think it's chilling. I love the skeleton key. But the title was in orange. And I was like, there's no orange like anywhere in the book, aside from maybe if you take into account that it's Wisconsin, probably orange construction barrels everywhere. But otherwise it's should be red, because there's a lot of red symbolism in the book. There's Morgan's red hat, her red scarf, a red balloon. And also like police lights, like it looked so great, like against that like icy blue cover. And they were like, no, and I was also like, I hate the color orange. And they were like, no problem, red looks terrific. And then like, great, I won. This looks awesome. And then like the next week they had the paperback for Hello Transcriber and the fonts in orange. I'm like, I just leave it. Like,
Was it always called The Widowmaker?
no. Actually, when I came up with the title, I remember I always have ideas when I'm running. And I was running at the gym and I came up with the title Widowmaker. And I was like, I love it. And I hope they don't change it. So it's like the Widowmaker. I love things that have multiple definitions or layers to them. So Widowmaker, actually, the Porsche that's involved in the book is 1978 Porsche 930 Turbo, which like, look at me, I look like I sound like I know cars. I don't even know that car. But it was nicknamed the Widowmaker for its habit of killing its owners. And then law enforcement as a career is nicknamed the Widowmaker. And then the book, opens up with a cop getting shot. So I really liked how those definitions like come together. It means more than one thing. And then my editor told me, she's like, Hannah, we cover conferenced the book, which cover conferencing means it's like the first time that the team is getting ready to talk about that book, like focus on that book. So they cover conference it. She's like, everybody agrees it should be called The Widowmaker. What do you think? And I was like, ugh. I was like, that is the worst. I can't believe I did that. And then I gave her all these like reasons of like why it absolutely cannot be called The Widowmaker. I told my agent, and then my agent was like, but why can't it? And I was like, all right, you know what? This is not the hill that I'm going to die on. If you guys have to call it The Widowmaker, I think it's just hard when you live with a book for 2 years and there's no the in front of it. And then people come around and you're like, you didn't even read it. What do you know? But
If you really genuinely like hard rule did not want that, would they have let you keep it without it at the end of the day?
I don't
Or
know.
do they have more of like an influence that way?
Sometimes you have to, I just think I'm like, I know that there's books that the whole title gets changed completely. And I really just loved the idea of Widowmaker. So I was like, if that's the worst they're gonna do to it, let them do it. Because then my third one, they completely changed the title. Yeah.
Like totally changed it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a process.
Yeah. So.
Very cool. Anything else before we get into the signing part? All right, cool. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thank you, Hannah, for your time talking
Yeah.
about this.
Oh, thank
This
you
was really
everybody
good.
for coming.